move to Amit Tyagi, who's the ISTAT certified appraiser and Chief Intelligence Officer of Acumen Aviation. Again, Amit goes back, I think, 2 years at least with us. He had very kindly, and Acumen Aviation, of course, also goes back with us as one of the one of the organizations which is always ready to jump into all new ventures and to work with us in developing a holistic aircraft leasing ecosystem. They have very recently also launched a postgraduate year-long diploma program in aircraft financing and leasing with a university. So, Amit, talking about Amit, he joined Acumen in 2009 as the Chief Intelligence Officer. He leverages his expertise as a certified ISTAT appraiser. And this is actually combined with a wealth of about 17 years of technical and commercial expertise in aviation, which he has working with sophisticated and diverse clientele. He has appraised various ABS transactions, asset sale purchases, market values, due diligence, and fly forward analysis in the last few years. And he is responsible for management of assets on behalf of investors and provides asset market insights, life values, and risk and ownership assessments. So, without much ado, he's also been working. Actually, he holds a bachelor's degree in aeronautical engineering, BSc PCM, BAML. He is pursuing the GMAE from IIM Bangalore, an MBA program, which is in collaboration with Toulouse Business School of France. So over to you, Amit, for taking us through this very important matter.
Thank you, ma'am. And I would like to thank Ministry of Civil Aviation and IFSC Authority and GIFT City in a collaboration with FICCI to conduct this masterclass and providing me this opportunity to comment on this very important topic of asset management. It's a very broad topic, and I think ma'am has given a lot of introduction, so we can skip that. If you could go back a little bit, I will just like to give about Acumen. So I think ma'am has spoken a little bit, but Acumen started back in 2009, and I also joined at the same time. And at that point in time, we had we were a technical consultancy, and subsequently, due to tax reason, we opened our office in Dublin, and Dublin became the main office. And we have gone to Miami, Beijing, and now, as ma'am has mentioned, we have also opened office in IFSC Gujarat. So Acumen has grown by leaps and bounds. We have our technical services, which contain several other services. We have a digital department containing Sparta system. We are developing our own softwares to assist the industry and on asset management side and the valuation side. And under commercial management, we manage the we are having commercial lease management and valuation and appraisal. So next slide, please. Okay, so from asset management perspective, it is important to note and understand what is the life cycle of an aircraft. From that perspective, generally, the aircraft is initially manufactured and given on first and second lease. The first lease is first or second lease maybe mostly between 6 to 12 years. And during that period, the various maintenance checks may be performed, or several other duty an asset manager need to perform. and those are essential to be monitored, and I'll elaborate on those two. Similarly, at the end of lease, then there will be a sale of aircraft, and the valuation of aircraft will be needed for several reasons. So I'll be covering that in my next slides. And similarly, after every lease, there will be requirement of valuation and remarketing. So that topic is also being covered under this. And finally, at the end of as we basically as an appraiser also, and as Michael also mentioned, we take the aircraft life to be around 25 years. And based on that, at the end of life, if the aircraft part out is delivering more value than actually aircraft as an entity, then the part out or disposal is the best option, and that is what is done. Next slide, please. Okay, so as soon as I mean, this is the starting phase for any lease. So the delivery conditions are what a lessor generally agrees with the lessee. Now, it is a prerequisite for every lessor or to meet these requirement before the delivery of the aircraft to the lessee, and which will include at the starting maybe configuration of aircraft and its maintenance status. And the condition could be different. If the aircraft is very new, it will be generally in the full life condition, or if the aircraft is used, then the delivery condition could be in the middle somewhere, but those will be agreed in advance. And in case of a used aircraft, generally the inspection is done at assembly line or during the testing of aircraft, and for a used aircraft, generally at the delivery location. And delivery condition, if the lessor is unable to meet the delivery condition, generally it will all be listed as exceptions, and either those need to be remedied or rectified before the delivery or within a stipulated time frame. And at the time of delivery, a certificate of technical acceptance will be signed and given by the lessee. So meeting the delivery condition is the first step to start the lease. Next slide, please. Redelivery. So once the lease is going on, and we continue to perform all the requirement during the lease, and finally the redelivery period will come depending on the lease term. So redelivery planning start at least 12 to 18 months in advance, and generally all the lease will have I mean, some of the leases may have extension option, some may not have. If there is an extension option available, first of all, that will be discussed with the current lessee. And if the current lessee is ready to extend the lease, then the lease extension may happen. If the lease extension is not happening, then it is sure that the redelivery will happen. So the redelivery planning will start, and the lessor will start trying to remarket this aircraft. Now, the best option available with the lessor is, or the lease manager is, if he can find the next lessee which will accept the aircraft in the similar configuration. If that is possible, that is the best scenario. And if he can match the delivery condition with the redelivery conditions are matching with the delivery condition of the next lessee, that is the best scenario. If that doesn't happen, then what are the changes between the two requirement? I mean, how we have to deliver to next lessee, and what is the current lessee is going to give, what are the delta. That delta need to be clearly checked out, and those modifications or changes need to be planned well in advance. Various stakeholder will be contacted, which will include OEMs, STC holders, or how that change is going to be performed. So that that starts in the background with the lessor, and the discussion starts with the next lessee also. And it will also involve the discussion of how the commercial arrangement will happen with the next lessee, whether those modification the lessor is supposed to do and give, or the next lessee is also going to take a certain portion of that, and all that is discussed in advance. After that, once the redelivery meeting is generally planned between the current lessee and the lessor around between 6 to 12 months in advance of redelivery date. And redelivery locations, MRO, lease return check package, etc. need to be discussed and agreed in advance, which may involve like hard time task or structural check task, or any painting requirement, etc. Those need to be ensured that they are part of the redelivery check. And this is a very essential requirement, because if anything misses at this stage, and then it can really cause trouble while delivering the aircraft to the next lessee. In so in such situation, if there is an additional cost to be borne by the current, I mean, there is a deviation between the current lessee and next lessee requirement, then additional task may be inserted, or additional requirement may be inserted into the check packages, and the lessor may pay directly to MROs, or as agreed between the parties. So next slide, please. Lease transition. So major point for a smooth lease transitions are all listed here, and it is essential that any lease transition is well planned, as I mentioned in my previous slide too. So if there is a deviation is existing between the current lessee delivery condition and next lessee's delivery condition, then all those differences, all the required kits, etc., should be arranged in advance, and because those can surely create a lot of trouble to deliver the aircraft if not well planned. And certain requirement with the OEMs also may take a lot of, because the kits availability could be very difficult in certain scenarios. Lessor will send its technical representative for detailed record review and the physical inspection, generally 45 to 90 days in advance, and which will all be discussed in the redelivery meeting, as I mentioned in my previous slide. And whatever observations or findings are noted during the reviews, those needs to be corrected. And if there are any issues which cannot be corrected, then the current lessee and the lessor will discuss, and those they will try to reach to a commercial arrangement, if that can be accepted by the next lessee. With this also, the lessor would try to bring in the next lessee at the same place, and they will request them to basically come and do the review at the same time before the lease end itself. So any finding from the next lessee is also taken into account, and their findings, and those are included into the findings while checking. If the return condition are matching, then the current lessee itself will perform those rectification actions, and aircraft will be delivered back. So this is the aim for any lessor to give aircraft, to accept the aircraft from current lessee and immediately deliver and sign the lease with the next lessee. That is what is the best scenario, and that is what every lessor tries to do. So lease transition is very important, and to ensure that the aircraft doesn't stay on ground without earning a lease rent for the lessor, and if it is not earning the lease rent, then it actually there are other associated expenses which comes into picture. So this is a very important topic. Next slide, please. Okay, before I go to the maintenance reserve, it is essential for the audience to understand why do we need maintenance reserve, and why it is necessary. So as you can see, three slides here. The first slide, first figure shows that the aircraft generally, when it is new, it is at 100% of or full life, full maintenance status. When we start utilizing, so this may be now taken into the first slide may be taken as a hard time item, or certain items which for which the utility can be reduced to the zero, and then again can be rebuilt back to the 100% life. So if we compare to similar to hard time items, the utility curves will move like a sawtooth curve as shown in the first one. If you notice in the second slide, then it shows that the initially when aircraft is for own condition items or such items, they will be at the 100% life at the start when taken new, but they will start moving down in the maintenance status, and the utility level will fall down to a certain extent, but it will not go down to zero, and neither it can be built up back to the 100%, because you will, for example, any engine will have its half of the LLP might be used, but you may perform a performance restoration, but you can't replace the LLP if they are having half of the life remaining. So basically you build it up, but it will not go back to 100% of life. It will reach back to maybe 80% or so, depending on where we stand in the maintenance status, depending on all the major components. So if we compare and mix up these two curves, what we find is the curve which is shown on the third figure. So this is the portion which is in the shaded is what is the value risk to the lessor. If the maintenance reserves are not being collected, then this risk will exist, and must be to recover to recover from this risk, value risk. It is essential to collect MR, and that is why we collect MR. Next slide, please. Okay, so maintenance reserve funds are actually collected for heavy or qualified maintenance events as agreed in the lease, and they are typically paid by the lessee to the lessor based on the maintenance utilization. Lessor will reimburse to the lessee those amounts once the maintenance event has been performed. Lessee lease agreement specifies the amount to be paid and the event which are reimbursable. So there will be qualified maintenance event which will be listed in the lease agreement with the definition. So only those will be reimbursable, and only for those the MRs are collected. And especially speaking, though, for airframe, those are structural checks. For example, for an Airbus aircraft, it could be 6-year and 12-year checks. For a Boeing aircraft, it could be like a narrow body 8-year, 10-year, or 12-year if we go with the previous MPD, and if we go with the new MPDs, it could be 9-year and 15 years. So depending on the lessee and lessor's agreement, those will be defined, and the qualified maintenance event definitions will be mentioned in the lease agreement. Rates will be further decided in accordance with the lease. Either mostly those are decided based on the maintenance cost and the expected time they are going to be used, and they are either listed in the lease agreement, or they are said to be agreed at the end of lease, depending. But in case of MR, they will be always listed, and escalation will be listed there. So what is the escalation percentage per annum, and the the escalation review date. So on which date the escalation will kick in. Collection of the MR will be mostly on the monthly basis. Every month, the lessee will send at the end of month the utilization, and based on that utilization, based on the agreed rate, the lessor will send an invoice to the lessee, and the collection will happen for that. And reimbursement to the lessee will happen based on the qualified maintenance events, and once the lessor is satisfied with the provided records, and once those are submitted, it is to be noted that mostly in advance of any MR event or a qualified maintenance event, generally the lessor is consulted, and generally lessor will agree to the MRO being used for such events. Next slide, please. Okay, as we have seen during the life, or every asset manager or a lease manager would require asset valuation at several stages of the aircraft, in a aircraft life cycle, due to different reasons. So while my colleague Michael has already covered on the valuation side, I have kept some of the slides for a quick understanding on that topic. To being a ISTAT appraiser, I thought it will be nice to have that. So what is an appraisal? Appraisal is the act of or estimating the value of an asset as per the definition or the which is contained in the appraisal report. It may be a base value, it may be current market value, or any type of values which will be shown in the subsequent slide. Why do we perform an appraisal? Because the asset manager would like to know or will need it for several different reasons, as highlighted here: for sale, purchase, insurance claim, decision, for exit strategy, tax purpose, or to find out the value of lease, etc. So there are different reasons why perform the appraisal may be needed. Whom to approach for appraisal? ISTAT certified appraiser is what is well accepted in the worldwide for commercial transport aircraft, and those are being used by lessor, investors, banks, private equity fund, insurer, reinsurer, or many, wherever, and they are well recognized and accepted in the market for most of the I mean, wherever such requirement arises. And what is ISTAT? ISTAT is a non-profit society which is including manufacturer, purchaser, brokerage, agencies, leasing, community, maintenance appraisal, and including airlines and so ISTAT provide certification to those who satisfactorily demonstrate that he or she is qualified to appraise an aircraft. So they conduct the exam and provide such certification. Acumen has 3 ISTAT certified appraiser and 2 ASA appraiser. ASA is American Society of Appraisers. Next slide, please. So these are the different type of values which is generally provided. Base value and market value is already covered in the previous slide. So I will straight away go to residual value. Residual value is the value of any aircraft for which is at any future date. Generally we require it to find out at the conclusion of lease term if we are valuing a value of a lease, or it can be at the end of life also. Depending on requirement, the residual value is value at any future date, and mostly the future based value or so, or as defined by appraiser in the report, will be taken. Distress value is something which is in case when the seller is or any seller is mostly in hurry to sell, and there could be a discount applied in such cases. So that is the distress value. Securitized or lease encumbered value is based on the future earning potential of the aircraft, which will include rent and terms or payment stream during what lease term is available, and estimated residual value at lease termination with a appropriate discount rate. And the discount rate will depend on several factors, depending on the risk and all other items which based on which the discount rate is find out. Part out or salvage value is, or at the end of life, as I mentioned in my previous slide, we need to check whether the aircraft basically is best to have in part out, or sell the parts separately, or value aircraft as an entity. If and that is, if we are selling parts separately for reuse on other aircraft, then such values are known as part out or salvage value. And when we compare both market value and salvage value, if whichever is higher, mostly the commercial decision will go accordingly. Next slide, please. These are the factors. I think some of those is already covered by Michael. I'm just mentioning here for clarity. In little more detail. So aircraft specific is age, weight and type, engine type. Well, while we take all this into account. And what is the interior configuration, utilization, our cycle will play a very great role, because depending on that is what is MRs are decided. And it, especially on engine, it is very, very important. On type specific, fleet distribution, engine choice, or how much product support is available in the market for that, whether MROs are available, whether it so there are what are the technological changes coming into that particular segment, and what is the product, where we do stand in the production cycle of that, and what is the industry specific capacity in the market, what is the stored fleet size at any particular time, whether airlines are operating profitably in that segment, or narrow body aircrafts are less affected. This is one of the reason, because the aircraft are back into service earlier than the other aircraft type. So that will also be one of the major factor. What are the future orders, deliveries? What are the regulatory changes coming? And same way, the macroeconomic factors which are taken into account as shown here. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so why do we value the aircraft? Basically, this is just to show that the list price or the new price could be in the range of 100 to 110 million. I'm not mentioning any aircraft specific, but it is any single aisle aircraft could be in that range, but the actual sale value could be between 44 million to 55 million. Next slide, please. So similarly, a wide body aircraft could range in the list price from 200 to 450 millions, but the actual sale price could be between 85 to 220 million. So it depends why there is a wide variation, and so the valuation is important part. Next slide, please. Residual value. So as residual value is one of the main concern, or any, you take lease encumbered value, or any type of value, it is essential for any asset manager to ensure that the residual value of aircraft is maintained. And this is why it is essential. What it is not possible to list everything here, but I'll give some certain points here. So to ensure, what an asset manager generally do, they will do a regular audits depending on the credit risk of an airline. It will be between 12 months to 36 months, and that will be decided by lessor or lease manager. And they will, during such audits, they will collect all the reports, and do the physical inspection of aircraft, and ensure that they have the latest status sheets, etc. So because the value of an aircraft is lot into the reports. Otherwise, those need to be again, there will be expenses to redo those tasks. Monitoring the financial health of a lessee and take timely action as per the lease is a very essential part of an asset manager. And if the lessee financial health is deteriorating, it is essential to have more frequent on-site visit and do surveillance as necessary. It is also essential to monitor if there is any financial or technical default between what is mentioned in the lease. Sometimes the lease will mention like tightened assembly should be installed on the aircraft. If it is not so, and the airline is also not in good financial health, then every asset manager would like to have their title assembly back to. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to chase them back and get it back in case of repossessions and when the airline goes bust or the lessee goes bust. So to avoid such situation, or if asset manager would be very concerned if there is any preservation of aircraft or aircraft is stored, if it is not a short-term preservation or due to forced region, everything is grounded, because in such cases the aircraft component could be taken out by the lessee to service other aircraft, and which can be a greater risk for a lessor. So these are the main points which are essential to be monitored to maintain the residual value and to ensure that the recourse or lessor has the proper recourse for that. Next slide, please. So these are the main type of values. As a base values is generally at half-time half-life, and to ensure or give a baseline value in half-time half-life condition, considering the aircraft is at or in a average physical condition. Residual value is the value of aircraft at any future date, and will take maybe in the half-time half-life condition for future, and it also is used for the lease encumbered value at the lease end, or that those values are required. Lease encumbered value, as I mentioned earlier, is for to find out the value based on the future payment streams and with a proper discount rate. Market value is as adding to the market factor into the base value or the maintenance adjusted base value, as the case may be, and finding out the actual situation of the value at that point in time. And similarly, salvage value is the part out value at the end of lease. So base value is generally maybe provided in a desktop appraisal. Due to paucity of time, I have not put the type of appraisal here, but I will quickly explain. The base value will generally be in the desktop appraisal will provide that, and similarly the residual value also. In a lease encumbered value, where the maintenance status or could be taken into account in the market value also, which is called extended desktop appraisal, where we take the current maintenance status of the aircraft and do the adjustment for the maintenance status at that point in time. And salvage value is mostly at the end of life, or when it is basically giving the best commercial I mean value to the lessor rather than aircraft as an entity. So these are the main type of values, and lease encumbered value, we can say a financial appraisal. So these are the major type of appraisals which are given. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you very much. So these are the, I hope I have been able to provide the required information in such short time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amit. The amount of wealth of information and knowledge you have provided us, it is so difficult to digest it. I'm going to need separate classes with you as a student, so that I can really understand and digest all the ramifications that exist on whether we are looking at factors exogenous to a lessor or factors endogenous to a lessor. When we set up the aircraft, what is more important, and how we need to begin to address all those aspects. Obviously, we have to improve the environment on both counts and to provide risk mitigation strategies so that the values of the assets held by the lessors in Gift City are impacted less than would otherwise be presumed. So I have actually, we are overshooting our time. We were supposed to be in for a lunch break at this time. But I do have some listed questions, and taking the liberty of time again and the testing the patience of all concerned. There are a few questions which I think we could address now before the speakers of this panel move for so there is a question from Hong Kong, Miss Charissa Chu. She has said, compared to Dublin, India has access to strong equity and debt capital markets domestically. How can that be tapped to help bolster this initiative? So if SBI or NIIF can answer this question, that would be useful. And then from her, do the tax and other incentives flow through the value chain through to equity and debt investors? So I can perhaps request Suresh Ji of PwC to answer this. May I request the others to switch off their mic? So is there anybody from SBI and NIIF? SBI, NIIF? Or Dipesh, would you like to answer this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll take this.
Hmm.
I think the question is very valid that can the Indian institution participate? So the way now this regulation has been structured is for the aircraft leasing entity, it can be a joint venture between a foreign lessor and an Indian lessor, or the Indian entities and the foreign entities can come together, and equity can be brought in by the Indian institutions in this. Similarly, it can be 50-50, it can be 100%. So the participation of Indian institution comes in. For debt, the ECB, the banks which are already housed in the IFFC would be able to give the debt, which will be dollar denominated. Plus, they have been allowed to give ECB in INR, in the local currency, to the entities operating there. And as far as the tax benefit flow is concerned, the entity will not be having a corporate tax for 10 years. However, the dividend distribution tax, which the SPV will pay to the parent, that based on the investors where they are housed, they will be required to pay the requisite tax. Otherwise, it will not be taxed on the entity level at the IFFC. And Suresh may like to add on the tax front on this.
Sure. Thanks, Dipesh. So, as rightly mentioned by Dipesh, you do have a 10-year tax holiday as far as India is concerned. And as far as securities which are listed on the exchange is concerned, so for example, if there is a capital raising which is happening on the exchange, investors do get a full tax-free regime. Securities which are listed on the IFSC exchange and are transferred, they are not subject to any tax in the hands of the investor. There is also a lot of, exemptions given in terms of applicability of security transaction tax, commodity tax. So I think in a way, capital markets in IFSC provide a very attractive regime, and companies may want to look at that to raise capital from IFSC.
Thank you so much. There is another question, and Suresh, perhaps you can address this as well. This is from Mr. Uday Gelli. Will there be any customs duty levied on helicopters imported and leased through Gift City?
So the answer is no. It is not likely to be levied. there are certain conditions to be satisfied. So, for example, if the IFSC is in SEZ, and if you are importing anything into SEZ, usually you will not pay any custom duty. So the same thing should apply even in case of helicopters. There are some amendments which are required. And I think the government is, I'm told, is working on that. Subject to that, I think the answer is that it's not legible.
Absolutely. There's another question from Mr. Kirit Manik of Bengaluru. It's a request not to ignore leasing opportunities of trainer aircraft by finance intermediaries and to have tie-ups with, and which have tie-ups with major trainer OEMs such as Cessna, Diamond, and Piper Aircraft for lease to FTOs, such that new generation aircraft are always available for the training. So here we can very simply answer that none of the types of aircraft or leasing opportunities are being ignored. There's another question from Mr. Arvind Jadhav from Mumbai, that if the investor owner of the aircraft is an Indian and wants to lease the aircraft to an Indian operator, then one, what are the tax implications for both lessor and lessee? And two, will DGCA allow this type of leasing engagement? On the first one, Dipesh, do you want to go?
Sorry, ma'am, can you just, I just missed that first one.
Yeah, so if the investor owner of the aircraft is an Indian and wants to lease the aircraft to an Indian operator, what are the tax implications for both lessor and lessee? You did address it in your PPT,
Yeah.
but this question is still there.
I think the way currently the IFFC is structured, it is more meant for the Indian entity availing these services from a foreign entities. So what it replaces now is that it replaces Ireland or Singapore or Mauritius, for example, that you were availing these services from those centers which can now be availed from IFFC. But as far as the Indian manufacturer is concerned and a leasing entity or a lessor is in India, which is both dealing into a local currency in India only, they may continue to do so within the domestic umbrella. That transactions can't move on the IFFC because that's a typical rupee transactions between two players. And tax incentives are not flowing for the domestic transactions in the IFFC zone.
Correct. And whether DGCA will allow this type of leasing engagement, I can just indicate that there are presently domestic to domestic, that is domestic lessor to domestic lessee transactions which are being concluded, and there is no bar on this type of leasing engagement on the part of DGCA. Another question by him is, how will we attract aviation leasing corporates to come to India for doing lease transactions? Because it is being averred that the European market is very sensitive and looks for minimal taxation. So I think we more or less answered this question. Then another one is, what are the plans for creating more IFSC centers in the country, in any other city? IFSC authority, would you like to take that up?
Yeah, currently, as per the policy of Government of India, the first IFFC has been made operational. And as we move, based on the experience of the other countries where the capital is not fully convertible, normally it has a gestation period of some 8-10 years that you develop a center, bring the economic activities and economy of agglomeration by bringing institutions. And then what China did maybe 8-10 years later, opened up other centers. So maybe a similar strategy, whatever the Government of India decides on this, will be followed for India.
Yeah. And then, of course, one other question is, what are the minima criteria, requirements, legal and financial, to set up aircraft leasing company in Gift City? I know perhaps Ashish from Moon SEZ, would you like to answer this?
Yeah, I'll just request you to repeat the question once again so that I can get.
So, what are the minima criteria requirements, legal and financial,
Yeah.
to set up aircraft leasing company in Gift City?
Okay, so in terms of legal criteria, as I mentioned, that any Indian company, Indian investor, individual, basically, if they want to set up a unit in IFSC, it will be under RBI ODI guidelines. And if it is a foreign investor, NRI, or a company, they can also set up either a company, limited liability partnership, or trust in IFSC. In terms of capital requirement, there's a minimum capital requirement of $200,000, which needs to be maintained at all the times in freely convertible foreign currency in aircraft leasing entity. So otherwise, there is no other restrictions in terms of legal or financial requirement.
Correct. So another question from a Mr. Amit Mittal from New Delhi for Dipesh is the capital requirements of 200,000 US dollars. Can these be used for aircraft purchase, and will it be deemed as a deposit in the by IFSCA when an entity registers there?
Yeah, so the 200,000 which you bring in as a capital can be utilized for the purchase of the aircraft. And before the purchase of the aircraft, whatever the amount you have received, that can be in the form of a deposit.
Dipesh, we've lost you.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yeah, we lost you after your first sentence.
Okay,
Whatever you brought in earlier can be.
Yeah, whatever you have brought in as a capital, that can be utilized for the purchase of the aircraft. In case you have not utilized that money for purchase of aircraft, you can put that $200,000 as deposit.
Okay, excellent. So then there is a question from Ninad Chavan in Mumbai. Are aircraft components stocking, warehousing, and leasing, as well as their MRO services, allowed in Gift City? Ashish, do you want to handle this?
Yeah, so particularly, ma'am, there is no restriction per se from SEZ or IFSC point of view. Only thing is the facilities needs to be built up by someone. So that is also being worked on. In fact, Dipesh bhai and myself were discussing onto this as well, because this is a requirement which will come definitely.
Yeah, so one of the answers to this would also be that all manner of services which are auxiliary or ancillary to aircraft leasing and financing, these are permitted to be undertaken from the Gift City IFSC. And in case there are requirements of component stocking or warehousing, to my mind, as Ashish said, there is no bar on it as well. As regards MRO services, I mean, you would need large hangars, or you would need some parts banks facilities. So these are available. So what we have been working on with the government is for providing extensions to the customs bonded facilities at various airports across the countries for lessors who wish to provide such services as part of their leasing transactions. So a customs bonded facility in Chennai, for instance, could be available for the customs, for the component stocking or warehousing for aircraft which are being leased out by lessors in Gift City. I'm not sure whether there are. Okay, one more question for Dipesh Shah is, which laws have been specifically made for enabling bankruptcy remoteness of SPVs set up in Gift City? Are they in sync with English laws? I think instead of Dipesh, I will let Mary Lou handle this question in her assessment on the legal issues, or even any of our second panelists, because legal issues will be coming up later, and either Mark Pierman Wright or Mary Lou can take up this question. So we will put this question on hold. Another question is regarding tax depreciation or capital allowances admissible on aircraft in the framework currently envisaged by the Indian authorities. Suresh, would you like to address that part?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I think tax depreciation is allowed. There is a 40% WDV which is provided in the tax laws.
Yeah, I see that Mary Lou, do you want to answer that question on the bankruptcy law, remote provisions and law?
Yes, yes, sure. So there is no separate law, framed with regard to entities in IFSC in connection with insolvency. The general laws applicable in India would apply, and an SPV usually is bankruptcy remote. There are some rare cases where, courts may lift the corporate veil in the case of, for example, fraud, or where they act as a nominee for another entity, or it's set up to avoid particular laws. But otherwise, an SPV is a separate legal entity, and the assets of that entity only would be touched in the case of insolvency of that entity. And in the case of a parent, they would not touch the assets of the subsidiary company. The shares of a subsidiary could be attached if it's an asset of the parent and the parent goes insolvent, but not otherwise.
Thank you very much. These are actually the questions that we had received from the the initial inaugural panel, as well as from the panel one. I know that we have eaten into our lunch break, and I'm tempted to continue with the work, even though it means a very heavy day for without break for all of us in the panels, at least, who are sitting, and for many of the participants who are offline. So I propose that we continue and take up our second panel